Hey you guys, this is Professor Vitt, and this is your mock final exam review video. There are 60 questions on this mock final. I'll show you down here, but there are only going to be 50 on your final exam. So that means 10 of these questions won't be covered. Now, I'm not going to tell you which 10 of those questions will not be covered. However, but I am going to cover the basics in this video. I'm not going to run through each of the 60 questions, but I'm going to give you a broad overview of them. And then hopefully that'll give you a basis along with your own study, along with a classroom review session. That should be sufficient to put you in a good place for the final exam. So let's go ahead and start. First up, we have some true or false questions. There are about 15 of them here. The thing with true and false questions is that they tend to test your reading comprehension more than they test the material, at least in my experience. But let's run through a few of them just to get a feel for where we are. Number one, critical thinking is thinking about thinking. This is a bedrock proposition for the class, right? It simply is true. It's how we've defined critical thinking. And so that's true. Number two, extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. Is that true or false? Well, that's true, right? This is a bedrock that we all follow, right? We all kind of adhere to this rule in some sense. But here we're just being a little bit more formal about it. And in this course, we're defining what extraordinary means and, importantly, what evidence means. So those two are just broad overviews of the whole course. Critical thinking is about memorizing a set of facts for a short period of time just to forget them once the chocolate milk flows like wine. Okay, that's false, right? The point of this class is not to memorize a bunch of stuff and then forget it. The point of the course is to develop judgment and your skills of evaluation. Anybody can search for something on Google, right? But the point of education is to build a scaffold or build a series of tools that will help you evaluate new instances and evaluate new claims about facts concerning the world. Number four, Occam's razor is a tool. You need to know Occam's razor. I'll tell you what it is. It's the simplest explanation is the best. Remember, it's not always true. But we can assume that it's true most of the time. All right, number 5 and number 10 are related. So number 5 is asking you about methodological naturalism, and number 10 is asking you about philosophical naturalism. Well, let's talk about them briefly. Remember, methodological naturalism, the root of that word is right here, method, meaning to do. So when a scientist goes into the laboratory, the scientist assumes, for purposes of doing the science, that the world is publicly available, it's measurable, and it can be studied methodically. Now, the scientist doesn't make that claim, right? But instead, the scientist is just assuming that it's true. Similar to how in this class, we assumed that our brain was the only thing that we were. But it may turn out to be different, right? People and philosophers and people and even scientists do make the claim that we're not just physical stuff, but we're also spiritual stuff. Well, you can make the claim that we're spiritual stuff, or you can just assume for purposes of doing your job that we're not, and you just kind of run through it. So remember, there are two types of naturalism. One that says, well, we just assume that this is true, but we're not going to really make the claim. And then there's a stronger form, a philosophical naturalism that says claim events in the world are publicly available, measurable, and can be studied methodically. Okay, so this one right here, I think you can tell number 10 is false, right? Because it's starting to mention stranger things and you're in trouble. Number 5 is true. So as long as you can clarify the distinction between those two, you'll be all right. Okay, 7 is kind of a silly joke. Number 6 is false. Remember, an anecdote is a fancy name for a story. And the problem with stories as evidence, at least one of the problems, is that we get bunches of different stories about one event. So, I mean, take, for instance, something like Elvis, right? Elvis dying. After Elvis died, people thought that he was still alive, and they located him in different locations, right? Well, it can't be true that Elvis is alive and living in Kansas. Let me say that properly. It cannot be true that Elvis is alive and living in Kansas, and Elvis is alive and living in Venice Beach. One of those has to be false, right? So similarly, when you get claims about ghosts or UFOs, they're not always the same. They're conflicting. And very oftentimes, eyewitness accounts of events, of one event, differ pretty significantly. So stories, although they are a good starting point for investigation, they don't serve as evidence for a claim, right? They're just the claim. All right, number 9, the lottery fallacy. This one would be important to know. The lottery fallacy is the name given to a form of reasoning in which people who win the lottery mistakenly assume that their problems are over. But the notorious Dr. B.I.G. has conclusively demonstrated that with more money comes more problems. Okay. This is false, right? The lottery fallacy is not a form of reasoning people who win the lottery have. The lottery fallacy is confusing the idea that someone will win the lottery with I will win the lottery, right? So suppose I go and I buy my lottery ticket and I use my birth date as the numbers, right? And then I win the lottery and I say, oh my gosh, of all the numbers that could have been drawn for the lottery, this is the one that is the winner, right? It must be fate because it is my birth date. Well, no, right? That would be a fallacy. It's clear that someone is going to win the lottery, and the combination of numbers that end up being the winning combination for the lottery that week or whatever, that combination is just as probable as any other combination, right? And so you have to be careful. It's kind of like, and I mentioned this in class, you and I are walking on the beach, and I reach down and I pick up a grain of sand and I say, oh my gosh, right? Of all the grains of sand in the world, I picked up this one. It must be fate. Well, no, right? I mean, wherever I'm walking, when I reach down to pick up the sand, I'm going to pick up some grain of sand, but it doesn't mean that I was predetermined to just pick up that one grain of sand. It could have been another one that I picked up, right? So very often these forms of reasoning come in different arguments regarding probability. So it's a good idea to keep them in mind because our brains are not very good at judging probabilities. All right. Fallacies are an error of reasoning. That would be correct. An example of an appeal to tradition would be accepting a position solely on the basis of sound reasoning and external confirmation. No, that's false. Remember, appeal to tradition is getting someone to accept a conclusion or a position on the basis that something has been done in the past and should be continued to be done, right? But it's not really, an appeal to tradition is not getting someone to accept a position on the basis of reasoning and external confirmation. That would be what we want them to do. So remember, 11 is false. Number 15 along these lines, attacking tradition can be an important part of critical thinking. Absolutely true, right? And that's part of what the appeal to tradition fallacy is getting at. Now, it doesn't mean that tradition should be thrown out the window and cast aside and forget tradition. Nobody wants that, right? We're not like going children of the corn up in here, okay? In fact, many traditions are in place because they were successful to some degree for whatever reason, right? We don't know, but sometimes tradition is a good thing. And it may be that we just don't know why the tradition was functioning so well or did so well. But it's still true that attacking tradition can be an important part of critical thinking. But remember, at the end of the day, it doesn't mean that we throw that tradition away. In many cases, the traditions are around for a reason. All right, number 16. So this was a question that I covered in class. And what I'm doing in this question is I'm asking you a question about a fallacy. And the fallacy that I'm asking you about is denying the antecedent. And so if you look on the back side of your sheet, you'll see that form there, and then you would choose your best answer. Remember, when you are doing your your final exam. I don't want you to just jump at the first option. Review all the options first and cross off the lame ones. That way, when you cross off the lame ones, if you're just guessing over 50 questions, right, you will eventually get a greater increase. If you had 50 questions and for each question you could knock out 2 options, that's a 20% increase in your guessing. That's 2 grade bumps up just because you're eliminating bad choices first, right? So that's a way to think about it. Remember to eliminate your bad choices on multiple choice. Okay, this is another question about appeal to tradition. So make sure that you read these options very carefully. 2 of them are very similar. One of them is a distractor, and then the remaining 2 options are just silly options to make you smile. Number 18, identify the best label for the following fallacy. Again, this is a great example. Let me just run this really quickly and I'll show you the benefit to eliminating wrong answers. Okay. Identify the best label for the following fallacy. Say Star Wars Rebels is the best show on television or I will drop you off this balcony. Is it A, ad hominem abusive? Well, if you didn't know anything else, that might be a good option, but it's not, right? But we'll leave it for A. B, appeal to force. That's a nice one, but we'll leave it, right? C, appeal to the force. Okay, well, that's obviously a joke, right? That's a Star Wars joke. Appeal to farce. A farce is, maybe you'd cover something like a farce in literature, but we're not covering it here in critical thinking. It's not a typo, it's a distractor. So that's not right. So notice we've knocked out C and D just by guessing. And then false cause oversimplification. Well, that's not right. False cause oversimplification is when you take a problem or some type of issue, and you confuse its cause. You oversimplify its cause, right? So someone might say, the United States Treasury has very little money because our tax rate isn't high enough. And somebody else may counter, well, that's not exactly true. Our tax rate is really high, but our problem is in collection of those taxes, right? In other words, it might be both, right? Maybe our tax rate isn't high enough and we're not collecting enough revenue. Sometimes this comes hand in hand with black and white thinking, but not always. So it doesn't have anything to do with our options. So E is off the table. Now, I don't know which answer it is at this point, but I've narrowed it down to a 50-50 shot. If you did that for every question and you just guessed, you'd still stand a pretty good chance of getting a somewhat decent mark. Well, if you were just guessing, you'd be in the running for a 50. But presuming there are other questions that you do know the answer to in the exam, you'd be in great shape. So between these 2, the option is B. If you are trying to decide between 2 options, and one of those options doesn't even look remotely familiar, it's not something we've discussed at all, and you haven't seen it in the book, and you haven't seen it in class, probably the wrong answer. Right? Okay. Number 19. This is with regard to Megan Bacon. Here, Megan Bacon is trying to manipulate folks, and she's doing so using a word choice fallacy. So I leave it up to you. You would need to know the difference between dysephomism and euphemism there, and those are available on your study sheet. All right. Number 20 is a repeat. 21, best example of appeal to tradition. Again, this is very similar to an early option we had here, number 17. If there are repeats, I thought there was only one repeat on this final, but if there's more than one repeat, enjoy the extra points, right? Okay, number 22. Okay, provide the best label. Okay. This question, number 22, is testing your knowledge of the appeal to authority fallacy. Remember, appeal to authority, there are 2 versions of this fallacy. The first one is when you have bad authority. Somebody doesn't know what they're talking about. So somebody has a PhD in physical chemistry, and they decided to go on the Suzanne Summers show, and they're going to talk about exercise. Well, they may know a lot about physical chemistry, but they know next to nothing about exercise. This happens a lot. You'll find somebody coming on the radio to give a paper on something, and then, of course, there's this total failure, right? Because they don't know anything about what they've been brought on to talk about. So that's the first option, right? Bad authority. The second option, the second fallacy with appeal to authority comes when people say, well, so-and-so said this, so it must be true. But remember, a speaker's education may help to inform whether or not we think a claim is true, right? So if a doctor says eating an apple a day is good for you, then that raises the likelihood that it is. It doesn't make it necessarily true, right? But it raises the likelihood of it being true. So you need to distinguish between the two. Now, it's okay to believe someone else's authority on a subject matter. We do it all the time. But you always have to be willing to concede that you're relying on their judgment here, and they could be wrong. Their knowledge doesn't make the thing true. All right. This one here is another fallacy based on form, so I'd encourage you to look through your outline on that. Another appeal to authority there. Number 25 is a nice lottery fallacy question. Number 26. Okay. Here we go. This question is, I'm going to go ahead and run it because we didn't cover false dilemma too much in the class. At a local political event, Clean speaks to a group of environmentalists. Quote, I can't believe Wash feels this way about what this administration is doing to the environment. She's either too stupid, too ignorant, or too evil to care. Which logical fallacy, if any, is Clean making here? All right, take a minute to review those options just on your own. Okay, all right, so the best option here, has a typo in it. This should be E, and I don't know why it isn't. I did fix it. That's troubling. Okay, the proper option here for number 26 is E, false dilemma, black and white thinking. So here's the way to think about it. Clean is talking to a bunch of folks, and then she makes this claim about, Wash is this horrible person because Wash isn't going to sign on to some particular environmental cause or something like that. Very often, this happens in politics, where we hear about what an opposing political party is doing, or we hear about an opposing political viewpoint, and we go nuts, right? Like, I can't believe you're doing this, right? You can see this on both sides of, for instance, the debate concerning abortion, right? Some people think, oh my gosh, these people who are pro-choice are monsters, right? They're just awful. They're evil, or they're stupid, or they're ignorant, right? And then on the other side, people who are pro-choice will say the same thing about somebody who's pro-life, right? Oh my gosh, the stance that they're taking. But you have to remember, there are not just those options, right? That this person is cruel, or they're stupid, or they're uninformed. It could be that they have a reasoned basis for their opinion, but it differs significantly from your own. And if you only give yourself those options, that the other side is stupid or ignorant or evil, that's going to prevent you from moving forward on any discussion in your life, right? You're just going to shut it down and say, what's the point? So you have to be careful in your own thinking that you don't commit this kind of black and white thinking where you say, nope, it's this or this, right? Well, no, in most things in life, there's a little bit of gray, right? Or at least you have to be willing to look for the gray, to see the other side. So that is E, false dilemma, black and white thinking. And the option here, appeal to authority doesn't help, false cause. Neither of those fallacies are in play. And of course, there is a fallacy here. I just described it, black and white thinking. All right, number 27 is a question about Albert Ostman and Bigfoot. And what I'm asking you here is what would be the best support for Ostman's claims? So you need to know in this question that I'm asking you about an extraordinary claim. And an extraordinary claim, in order to be established, needs extraordinary evidence, right? Otherwise, it's just going to be wrong, right? There'll be no support. It'll be up in the air. So here, you'd think which of these would be the best, right? Well, you'd want something that is open to inspection and physical. That would be the best option. So what you'd want to do here is look at these options and see, gosh, are any of these options such that they're physical and they would be open to inspection? The best answer here is also going to have a tie to the events. So remember, Osterman went to a place called the Toba Inlet. And so if we did discover, I hope you can understand here how, if we did discover 3 Bigfoots in a hidden pocket of ice up there, that would be a huge step forward in terms of verifying Osterman's claims. The rest here, a hostage diary might be helpful. Logging reports from ultimately other independent eyewitnesses with tufts of hair, that would be good. It wouldn't establish the claim. The tufts of hair might help. But the best answer here is going to be E, right? Okay. Begging the question, remember there are a couple of different forms of begging the question. There's assuming what you want to be true, and then there is asking a question that assumes something that's not yet been established. And so if you're familiar with those two options, I think 28 is a pretty simple home run. Okay, let's do 2 more, and then I'm going to take a little video break. Number 29 is a question about begging the question. So I think you can handle that one with just a straightforward understanding of the fallacy. Number 30, best example of dysphamism. Remember, dysphamism is saying something bad about something that is neutral or good. And you say that bad thing so that you can force somebody to accept the position, right? So now, A wouldn't work because that is just an appeal to force. B is a lyric from a song. Let me know if you know which one it is. C is appeal to repetition. Get it? Again? Okay. Maybe that's not very funny, but I think it's funny. D, a doctor's office where staff uses the phrase worm food instead of deceased. That would be a good option, right? Or E, a flaw in reasoning. That's just incorrect. So the best answer is going to be D. All right, I'm going to take a little video breather here, you guys, and then come back and finish up the rest. Okay, rock and roll. So we're now on to the second portion of this baby. Mock exam review video. We have approximately 30 questions left to review. All right, let's take a quick peek here. I've got a bug in my hair. At number 31. Okay, in number 31, it's testing an appeal to authority fallacy, and I'm going to leave it up to you to figure out whether I'm testing one or both of them. In order to answer this question properly, just understand there are 2 types of appeal to authority, and you'd need to be able to spot both of them in order to answer this question correctly. Because as you can see, the options here are that either they're both true or one of them is true. So, all right, number 32. Let's go ahead and read 32. It's a little bit long, and it has to do with fallacies and particularly, let's do it. Okay. After a 3-decade review of every piece of Bigfoot evidence known, Lasagna decides that she does not find the evidence convincing. Her friend Linguini hears that Liz does not believe in Bigfoot and tells her, "You're just a skeptic. You just don't believe in Bigfoots because you refuse to consider the evidence." What would be the best response Liz could give to Lynn? A, this is a fallacy denying the antecedent. I don't know. Is it? I would look at that option pretty carefully and see whether or not she's committing that fallacy. B, this is a fallacy, a straw man. You're attributing a view to me I do not hold. I'm open to the evidence. I've reviewed it for 30 years. I just don't find it convincing. The evidence is ordinary and the claim is extraordinary. That's a very good answer so far, but I don't want to bite the bullet yet. Just make sure that all the other options aren't so good, and if that's the one we want, then we'll go with that. C, this is a fallacy. Appeal to ignorance. Just because I'm not familiar with different kinds of Italian pasta doesn't mean Bigfoot doesn't exist. Okay. Nay, that's not a very good option, right? So you can see how it's a distractor, but if you're not reading through the full option, right, this is just an appeal to ignorance. Okay, that sounds good. You'd miss, right, all of the rest of it. D, this is a fallacy begging the question. Lynn, you're assuming what you want to prove. Is Lynn making a claim here, right? I mean, is she making a claim about the existence of Bigfoot? She is, but is that the best answer? D, begging the question again. I just talked about that one. E, this is a question of priorities, but SpongeBob is clearly at fault for allowing the jellyfish into his house to begin with. I wonder if anybody knows the reference of that SpongeBob episode. If you do, please let me know. Okay, so the best answer here is going to be B. Now, this may be tough because we didn't talk about straw man very much, but the idea is in a straw man, it's a fallacy because what you've done is people who commit the straw man fallacy essentially make up a bad position and then attack it and feel like they've done this great big thing, right? In other words, you're attacking literally a straw man, a figment, a fake version of the argument. And that's exactly what's going on here, right? We know that Lasagna has been looking for years at this, right? And so she's not just being a skeptic. It's not that she doesn't refuse to consider the evidence. She's been considering it for 30 years, right? She just doesn't find it convincing. So it is a straw man because Lynn is saying of Liz, well, you're just not considering the evidence. But of course Liz has. So your answer there is going to be B. By the way, you might have been able to figure that out without really knowing what straw man was. Okay, 33, Salt and Pepper's here. Professor Salt and Pepper greeted his class warmly that morning. He set down his coffee before he spoke. The inside of my skull houses a massive star, which gives me superpowers. But the moment you look inside there with either a CAT scan or whatever, it changes into a normal brain. Prove me wrong. Okay, which of the following options best describes Dr. Zoltan Pepper's comment? All right. So there are lots of options here. I guess I want to divert your attention to the last part of his little speech, right? Prove me wrong. And ask yourself, if I make a claim, and I say, right, let's say my claim is that I have a star inside my head, and I say, prove me wrong. Well, is it your job to prove me wrong? No, right? It would be my job if I'm making the claim to establish that there's a star inside my skull, right? It wouldn't be your job to try and defeat that view. So keep that in mind. The person making the claim carries the burden of evidence. So in this case, he's shifting the burden of proof. All right. Number 34, I'll go ahead and tell you guys about, just because it's not a fallacy that we've covered. The Beatles are the most talented band ever in the history of music. This is true because lots of cool cats think that this is true, Daddy-O. Okay, which logical fallacy, if any, is being made here? The answer here is appeal to popularity. Remember, just because lots of people believe something doesn't make it true. It just means that a lot of people believe it. And that's exactly what's going on here. We know the Beatles aren't the most talented band ever in the history of music. Okay, does anybody know the answer to that? It's the Professor Vitz. They're the best band. No, I'm just kidding. I was going to come up with a joke there, but I really couldn't. I couldn't come up with another band. Okay, 35 should look familiar. Number 36. I would just be familiar with each of these fallacies listed here and try to determine, right, is this an appeal to tradition? Is this false dilemma begging the question? Is it begging the question assuming a conclusion, or begging a question loaded question? Should be able to apprehend that one fairly straightforwardly. We covered this one in class, number 37. It's okay. All right, why don't we go ahead and read 40? It's fairly involved, and you might need I think it would be useful to have a little review of it. Number 40. Mosquito is a true believer in Elsie, the unknown animal said to inhabit the fresh, clean waters of Lake Elsinore. He is at a party when Dr. Zoltan Pepper says, Lake Elsinore, or should I do the same voice? No, probably not. Lake Elsinore was completely dried up in 1954 and no one found any evidence of Elsie. Sorry, but you need Mo evidence, Mr. Skeeto. Oh, right, and then there's the gif of them all, right? Mo replies, quote, Elsie can disappear into a wormhole whenever she wants. That's why they didn't see her, and that's why there's not much evidence for her. Which of the following best evaluates Mosquito's relationship to evidence for Elsie? All right. D and E looks like they each referred to two different options, right? D says A and B are going to be right, and E says A and C will be correct. So the proper answer to this question will have to lie in a three-part understanding, right? We're going to need to understand each one of these options and determine whether or not either or one of them is going to be true. So here we go. A, Mo is in real trouble here. A lack of evidence for Elsie has now become evidence for Elsie. Mo's beliefs have little or no relationship to reality because there's no way to test them. That's a pretty solid start, but I would hold off before you push all the way through, right? B, Mo is in real trouble here. Mo is trying to prove one unknown thing, Elsie, by appealing to another unknown thing, wormhole travel. Explanation of the unknown must be in terms of what is known if it is to be a good explanation. All right, and then C, B is very good, right? A is also good so far. Let's check out C. Maybe C is even better than one of those options. C, Mo is in real trouble here. Mo is seeing patterns of aliens in toast where there are none. He's suffering from pareidolia. All right, nothing about aliens in toast in here. So it's probably going to be either A or B or both. Stop and ask yourself which one you would pick, both or one of them. The answer is both. They're both pretty good, right? We didn't talk too much about this second option, but it should make particular sense, right? If somebody says, well, this UFO craft shot off at an unbelievable speed and it didn't make any sound at all, right? It didn't break the sound barrier. It just disappeared in the sky. It was traveling so fast it should have broken the sound barrier, but it didn't. Now, if I say, gosh, how did this UFO do this, right? Someone might say, well, they have a transdimensional hyperdrive. And I'd say, well, what's that? And they say, well, it's this theoretical thing. And okay, there are no transdimensional hyperdrives yet. Okay, so you can't explain the behavior of this unidentified object, this unknown object, by appeal to another unknown thing, right? It's like asking, where do Bigfoots come from? They come from Atlantis. Well, is that helping, right? I understand it's a theory, but you've taken one unknown thing and you're saying the explanation for this unknown thing is this other unknown thing. No, your explanation would have to be in terms of things that are already known, right? To be meaningful. Number 41, which of the following is the best example of an appeal to fear fallacy? I would just take a peek at those and examine them critically. Number 42, we've discussed, I've given that option that scenario many times in class, so I'm going to leave that one where it is. But I would pay attention to the first couple options. It's one of those, right? It's one of these first options here. All right. Number 43 is pretty straightforward. 44 is pretty decent. Number 45 involves looking at this diagram. Here, I don't know if you can see it on the video or not. This is a diagram, a very famous drawing of the magic bullet from the assassination of John F. Kennedy. And this is Kennedy and this is Conley. We talked about this in class. It was included on the JFK handout. The problem with this diagram, you should remember immediately, is that Connally is seated at the same height as Kennedy, but we know that's not true. Connally was lower. So this is not an accurate rendition. Okay, so if you can remember that much, then when you come to the question, it should be a little bit easier to tackle. Number 45, looking at the diagram above, this one, Colleen states, the diagram shows beyond a shadow of a doubt that JFK was not killed by one single magic bullet. Which of the following options best reflects Clean's error in reasoning? A, he's made an unfounded assertion. He's not really established that this is how JFK and Governor Connally were sitting. Okay, I like it so far. B, Clean is suffering from confirmation bias. He's counting the hits and forgetting the misses. That's just too general. It doesn't really help us, right? It doesn't really fit. It's true that's what we think of when we think of confirmation bias, but it's not actually it, right? C, Clean's made an incorrect application of Occam's razor. Just because the application is the most simple doesn't make it correct. Is he making an option here? Is he making an application of Occam's razor here? D, he's suffering from burnout. He needs a few days at the beach. Don't we all? No, I'm just kidding. If I had a few days free, I probably wouldn't go to the beach with them. I mean, maybe one of the days, but not all of them. Okay, C, he's suffering from apophenia. He's seeing a random pattern in this picture where there is not one. Ish, at least it relates to the picture, but the best answer here has really been A, right? This is an unfounded assertion. All right, number 46. Consider the following statement by Roy Batty. My father and mother believed in ghosts, and their parents before that believed in ghosts. My culture's been believing in ghosts for thousands of years, so there must be ghosts. All right, this would be what? Think about what he's appealing to make the statement true, and that should help you. All right, let's go forward here to... That's actually... You wouldn't believe this, but this is actually a repeat of an earlier question, at least in theory. The answer to this question lies in this last question here, right? That Clean says, and right here. So there are two things going on, right? This line here, where he's appealing to something, right? Namely his lack of knowledge. And then this one here, where Clean is screaming at Wash. So there are two things you need to look at carefully there for 49. Number 52. The prompt here is, which of the following is the best explanation for Glenn Dennis's claims? Remember Glenn Dennis with Roswell way back in the day, the mortician? Here we go. As a mortician in 1947, Roswell, New Mexico, Glenn Dennis claims to have seen an alien corpse walking on the Roswell Air Force Base on its own power. It had a massive head. Glenn Dennis says he's confident in his memory of these events as he is of his name. Which of the following is the best explanation for Glenn Dennis's claim? A, he's telling the truth because he's putting his life at risk. B, he's an honorable person and he wouldn't lie. He's committed a memory error. He's committed a memory error, and a memory error is consistent with someone being confident in her memories and appealing to ignorance. Okay, the best answer here is the memory error, right? Remember, there was a crash. There were a series of accidents on the Roswell Air Force Base that actually did match up pretty nicely with Glenn Dennis's memories, but they were memories of normal events. So the big alien walking under its own power, well, that was someone who'd been hit by a propeller blade, right? And had this huge, that's right. And then this huge, massive hematoma. His head had blown up to the size of a baseball. But he said he actually felt okay and was smoking a cigarette and walking around on his own. So this would be it. And this is a careful piece of advice. Your memory is worse than you think, but your confidence in your memory is great. So you have to recall that although details and images may be very vivid in your recall, the likelihood that they're correct is not as high as you'd think. All right, validity. Remember, this was from the argument section. And a valid argument, right, is an argument where the premise is if the premises are true, guarantee that the conclusion will also be true. All right. Little repeat there. Which of the following describes pseudoscience? Remember, pseudoscience is a sham. It looks like regular science, but it's not. Okay, a difference between science and anecdotes. I'm going to leave that there for you guys. Let's do 58. Clean gets sick with the flu and then drinks 1 gallon of macadamia nut oil. After that, he feels better. He then proclaims, see, macadamia nut oil cures the flu for everyone. Which of the following is a valid objection to Clean's claim? All right. Clean would have gotten better from the flu anyway. Certainly true. B, Clean might have a unique body chemistry and immune system, which makes his results unique. Yeah. C, all of these options are valid objections. Well, we don't know yet. We got to read D and E. D, Clean might have misdiagnosed himself. He might have had allergies or a cold instead of the flu. If so, that would make his claim about curing the flu wrong. E, Clean might still be sick, and he's convinced himself that he's not. Okay, the option here is C, right? All of these are valid objections. It's important to remember when you are determining for yourself whether or not some natural remedy works, right? Is that any one of these things could be true of you. And so it's very difficult to be certain when you assess the validity of a medical product or a medical treatment that's non-standard on your own. Any of these things and more could be true. And so it's important that you look whether or not there's any clinical data that reflects objective mechanisms in the world rather than an error in thinking that would be present in any of these options. Okay. Let's do number 15. Oh, excuse me. We just did 59, didn't we? Let's do 59. Clean is presented with all of the objections raised above concerning his claim about the macadamia nut oil. Clean gets visibly upset. With a red face, he yells, "You're part of the pharmaceutical industry. You're trying to fool me so you can sell me expensive medicines." Which of the following best describes Clean's response? A, Clean is encountering pareidolia. He sees faces and patterns where they do not exist. B, Clean is encountering the backfire effect. Rather than revise his beliefs, he's doubling down on them. Double ding. Double ding. There's doubling and then there's double ding. And if it's a double ding, y'all better look out. Okay. C, Clean is probably right. You do work for a big pharmaceutical company. D, Clean needs to rely more on the Vorpal sword since it's the only thing that can kill the Demogorgon. Duh. E, Clean is encountering the backfire effect. Rather than change his beliefs, he's going to revise them. Okay, be careful. That looks right, but it's not. Remember, revise is another word for change. So, I'm going to look at B as your best answer there. All right, we'll do 60, and then that will complete the review video. If you have questions for me, please ask them Monday before I hand out the exam. Number 60, general manager for the Lakers, Rob Pelinka says, the odds of us winning the number 2 pick in the NBA lottery for 3 years in a row is very high. This is proof that the Lakers are the team of fate. As such, they will destroy the competition. Which of the following best explains Rob Pelinka's error in reasoning? Okay, A, there is no fallacy here, just a river of form, blue and gold. Okay, no, that's Professor Vitt being a Lakers fan. B, lottery fallacy. Mr. Pelinka is confusing what the odds are of any team winning the second pick in the lottery 3 times with any team winning the lottery. C, the answer does not matter because this question will not be on the final. D, both B and C express this fallacy, and if you don't know, then you know. E, false dilemma. I want to rock and roll all night and party every day. Okay, the best answer here is B. If for no other reason, then these are just other silly options, right? Okay, I hope this has been a helpful review for you guys. I think coupled with class participation and class attendance, I've given you a really good starting point for the final, and I look forward to seeing you guys all do super well on them. Please remember, your final is due on Wednesday, the last day of class. It must be physically handed in. I will not accept any submissions by email for your final. Okay, you guys, thanks a lot, and I hope you have a fantastic review.